My name is Linda Harper. I'm 61 years old, and until last Friday morning, I was the project coordinator at Evercore Urban Design in Omaha, Nebraska. I had held that position for 7 long years, 7 years of double-checking permits, chasing deadlines, calming city officials, and making sure multi-million-dollar projects didn't collapse under regulatory pressure. And all of it ended in less than 3 minutes. We're implementing budget cuts, and your position has been eliminated, Ethan Brooks said with a careless shrug, leaning back in his leather chair like he was dismissing a delivery driver, not a senior employee. Thanks for everything, Granny. I sat across from him in his spacious corner office, the words barely registering at first. My hands were still holding the certificate of completion for Maya Collins's training program, warm from the printer. Just minutes earlier, I had proudly presented it to him, explaining how successfully I'd trained the new intern over the past 4 months. I had thought this meeting was about recognition. Instead, it was my termination. Today is your last day, Ethan continued when I didn't immediately respond. Human Resources has prepared your final paycheck and severance. 2 weeks' pay. 2 weeks. 7 years of loyalty reduced to 14 days of compensation. I finally managed to speak, though my voice felt distant, like it belonged to someone else. Budget cuts? I asked. The same week we secured the $35 million Riverside development project. For a brief moment, Ethan looked uncomfortable. He adjusted his expensive tie and avoided my eyes. It's a strategic restructuring, he said smoothly. Maya will be taking over your responsibilities now that you've completed her training. Maya Collins. 24 years old. The intern I'd been training since March. I had patiently taught her everything, how to navigate the maze of city regulations, which planning officers preferred early submissions, which deadlines were flexible and which absolutely weren't. She had no real background in urban development, but she did have a strong social media presence and a talent for looking confident. I see, I said quietly, gathering my dignity like armor around my chest. Will there be a transition period? The Riverside project still has several critical permits pending. That won't be necessary, Ethan replied, already glancing at his phone. You've done a thorough job training Maya. She's up to speed on everything. I knew that wasn't true. 4 months of training could never replace 7 years of experience, let alone the 3 decades I'd spent in this industry before joining Evercore. But arguing wouldn't save my job. Human Resources will help you clear out your desk, Ethan added as he stood, signaling the meeting was over. Security will escort you out by noon. Security. As if I were a threat. Thank you for the opportunity, I said, standing as well. It took everything in me not to tell him exactly what I thought about his strategic restructuring. As I walked out of his office, I saw Maya waiting near the reception desk. She tried to look professional, but the excitement in her eyes was unmistakable. She knew this was coming. Maybe she had even helped make it happen. I didn't confront her. I didn't cry. I simply walked past her. What they didn't know, what none of them understood, was that firing me wouldn't be the end of this story. It would be the beginning. 2 hours later, I placed a small cardboard box containing my personal belongings into the trunk of my car and sat behind the steering wheel, staring straight ahead. My hands rested uselessly in my lap as the reality finally settled in. 7 years. 7 years of dedication ended with budget cuts, Granny, and a security escort. I hadn't always worked at Evercore Urban Design. For most of my career, I'd been employed at much larger firms across Omaha's development sector. I'd helped shepherd hospitals, housing complexes, and public infrastructure projects through layers of red tape that would make most people quit within weeks. But 7 years ago, when the housing market crashed and layoffs swept through the industry, Ethan Brooks had personally recruited me. "We need someone who understands the system," he'd told me back then. "Someone who already has relationships inside the city planning office." He wasn't wrong. Those relationships had taken decades to build. And they were the reason Evercore had grown from a struggling 5-person studio into one of Omaha's most promising urban design firms. The Riverside development was their biggest project yet, a $35 million mixed-use complex that would completely transform the downtown riverfront. And I had been at the center of it from day one. I'd spent months securing preliminary approvals, calling in favors from all contacts, navigating zoning restrictions, and smoothing over concerns from environmental and safety departments. The project was only alive because I knew exactly who to call, and when. I hadn't minded when Ethan asked me to train Maya Collins. New blood was important in any company. And I genuinely enjoyed mentoring younger staff. For 4 months, I patiently explained every form, every deadline, and every unwritten rule that separated a stalled project from a successful one. "The trick with the zoning office," I'd told her once, "is to submit on Tuesdays. Samuel King reviews applications on Wednesdays, and he's much more flexible than the Thursday staff." Maya had nodded eagerly, taking careful notes and asking thoughtful questions. I'd been impressed by her enthusiasm. I'd even defended her when other employees complained about her constant social media posting. "She's young," I'd said. "But she's working hard and learning fast." What I hadn't seen were the private lunches she shared with Ethan. The closed-door meetings. The way she subtly positioned herself as the innovative future, while quietly framing me as the outdated past. I started the car and finally pulled out of the parking garage. Instead of heading home, I pulled out my phone and called my daughter. "Mom." Sophie Harper answered, surprised. "Aren't you at work?" "Not anymore," I replied, my voice cracking despite my efforts. "I was fired today." "What?" Her shock turned instantly into anger. "Why?" I explained everything, the sudden termination, the insulting severance, and the fact that I'd been replaced by the intern I had trained myself. "That's age discrimination," Sophie said immediately. "You can sue them." "Maybe," I replied, signaling as I merged onto the road. "But I'm not sure a lawsuit is my first move." There was a pause on the line. "Mom, what are you thinking?" "Nothing," I said lightly. "I just need some time." But that wasn't true. What I really needed was to remind Evercore of exactly what they had thrown away. That evening, I sat alone at my kitchen table with a cup of tea and my laptop open. The shock had faded, replaced by something sharper, anger I rarely allowed myself to feel. I opened a folder I maintained meticulously for years. Inside were digital copies of every permit, every application, every approval I'd secured for Evercore projects. And then I opened the Riverside development files. That's when I smiled. Because what Ethan and Maya didn't understand, what they'd never bothered to learn, was that those permits weren't just standard forms submitted through normal channels. And without me, they weren't going anywhere. 3 years earlier, the city of Omaha had approached me directly. The planning office was overwhelmed, understaffed, overworked, and buried under increasingly complex development proposals. Major projects were stalling for months, sometimes years, simply because no one had the time or experience to guide them through the maze of regulations. Samuel King, the senior planning officer, had called me one afternoon. "Linda," he'd said, sounding exhausted, "we need help. You know how both sides of this process work better than anyone I know." That conversation changed everything. Together, we developed a solution. I established Harper Regulatory Consulting LLC, a separate consulting firm that would act as an official liaison between developers and the city. The arrangement benefited everyone. The city got a reliable point person who understood compliance from both sides. Developers got their permits processed efficiently. And I gained additional income and security outside my full-time job. Evercore Urban Design knew about this arrangement. In fact, it was one of the main reasons they had hired me in the first place. What they had forgotten, or chosen to ignore in their rush to replace me with someone younger, was that my consulting firm wasn't just a formality. It had real authority. I clicked through the Riverside development files carefully. Every critical permit had been filed under Harper Regulatory Consulting's oversight. Every application required my digital signature for final approval. Without me, those permits were in limbo. I closed my laptop and took a slow sip of tea. I had options. I could sign off on the permits as a professional courtesy, allowing Evercore to proceed without interruption. That would have been the kind thing to do. Or I could remind them exactly what they had lost when they fired me. My phone buzzed. A text from Sophie. "Don't do anything rash, Mom. Talk to a lawyer first." I smiled. She really did know me too well. The next morning, Saturday, I met my friend Monica Reynolds, an employment attorney, for coffee at a quiet cafe downtown. "They can't just fire you because of your age," Monica said after hearing my story. "But proving age discrimination can be tricky." "I'm not interested in a discrimination lawsuit right now," I replied. "I want to understand my obligations regarding the permits filed through my consulting company." Monica raised an eyebrow. "Oh. I see where this is going." She leaned forward. "If those permits were filed through your LLC and your signature is required for finalization, you are under no obligation to provide that signature without proper compensation. And if Evercore assumed those services were covered under my employment?" I asked. "That would be their mistake," Monica said with a small smile. "Especially if your consulting work was clearly established as a separate legal entity." "Do you need documentation?" she added. I nodded. "Plenty." "Perfect," Monica said. "I'll draft the letter outlining your position." As I drove home, I felt something I hadn't felt since Ethan's dismissive budget cuts. Granny comment. Control. Monday morning arrived with a flood of missed calls and increasingly frantic messages from Evercore. I ignored every single one. Instead, I enjoyed my first workday in years without fluorescent lights or rush meetings. I had breakfast slowly. I did the crossword. I even spent time in my garden, enjoying the early spring sunshine. At 10:15 a.m., my phone rang again. This time, it wasn't Ethan. It was Samuel King from the city planning office. "Thank goodness you answered," he said. "We've got a situation with the Riverside permits." "I suspected as much," I replied calmly. "Evercore submitted a request for final approval," Samuel continued, "but everything is filed under your LLC. We told them we can't proceed without your digital signature." "That's correct," I said. "My company is the official liaison for the project." There was a pause. "They told us you're no longer involved due to restructuring." "My employment ended Friday," I said evenly. "My consulting company's role did not." Samuel sighed. "Without your sign-off, they need to resubmit everything through standard channels." "And how long would that take?" I asked. He laughed softly. "For a project like Riverside, months. Minimum." I thanked him and hung up. Seconds later, I saw 3 missed calls from Ethan. His latest voicemail was very different from the last. "Linda, Look, I think there's been a misunderstanding. Can we talk about the riverside permits? I smiled. He finally understood. At noon, an email from Monica landed in my inbox. Draft letter attached. Let me know when to send. I opened it slowly, reading every word with care. It was professional, firm, and impossible to misinterpret. Harper Regulatory Consulting LLC would be happy to complete the permit process for the riverside development for a consulting fee of $75,000, roughly equivalent to 9 months of the salary Evercore had just decided I was no longer worth. In addition, the letter requested formal credit as the regulatory compliance specialist on all official project documentation. I approved it without changing a single word. Monica sent the letter immediately. The response was almost instant. Ethan's reply wasn't thoughtful or apologetic, it was frantic. This is urgent. Call me immediately so we can discuss this like professionals. I didn't respond. Instead, I put on my shoes and drove to my favorite plant nursery. I spent the afternoon selecting herbs and vegetable seedlings, carefully choosing tomatoes, basil, and peppers. There was something deeply satisfying about planting things that would grow, unlike the corporate loyalty Evercore had assumed was disposable. While I was examining a tray of rosemary, my phone rang again. Unknown number. Hello, this is Linda Harper. Mrs. Harper, this is Daniel Whitmore. I nearly dropped my phone. Daniel Whitmore was the principal investor behind the riverside development. A powerful man with deep pockets, and absolutely no tolerance for delays. I understand there's an issue with the riverside permits, he said, his tone calm but unmistakably sharp. Ethan Reed seems unable to explain the situation clearly. I'd like to hear it directly from you. I agreed to meet him the following morning at his downtown office. When I returned home, I found another email waiting. This one was from Kayla Monroe. The subject line read, "Please help." Her message was a mix of desperation and misplaced confidence. Linda, I know you must be upset about the restructuring, but holding up Riverside will only damage your reputation. Please be reasonable and sign off on the permits. I'd be happy to make sure your name is included in the acknowledgements. Acknowledgements. After being fired. Replaced. Escorted out like a liability. I deleted the email without replying. Tuesday morning, I dressed carefully. Navy suit. Simple pearl earrings. Professional, composed, undeniable. Daniel Whitmore's office overlooked the very riverfront the Riverside project was meant to transform. He wasted no time. I've invested over $12 million so far, he said. And now I find out the entire project is stalled because Evercore fired the one person who understands the permitting process. I opened my laptop and walked him through everything, every filing, every approval, every pending clearance, all legally tied to Harper Regulatory Consulting. Without my digital signature, I said calmly, the city cannot proceed. Daniel leaned back, studying me carefully. And Evercore claims you're doing this out of spite. I'm doing this because my consulting company is a separate legal entity, I replied. And because professional expertise has value. A long pause followed. Then Daniel smiled. Mrs. Harper, he said, I'd like to make you an offer that removes Evercore from the equation entirely. I blinked. I'm listening. Whitmore Development will retain Harper Regulatory Consulting directly, for Riverside and future projects. Same fee you proposed. Plus performance bonuses. My heart stayed steady, but inside, something shifted. And Evercore? I asked. That's between me and them, he said coolly. But I'm reconsidering our relationship. By the time I reached home, Monica was already reviewing the contract. It was better than anything Evercall could offer. And Ethan. Ethan was running out of time. By Wednesday morning, Ethan Reed's desperation was no longer subtle. I woke up to 12 missed calls, 5 voicemails, and a flood of emails marked urgent. Offers escalated by the hour. First, he proposed doubling the consulting fee. Then tripling it. By noon, he was offering me my old job back, with a raise, a title change, and a vague promise of greater respect going forward. It would have been laughable if it hadn't been so predictable. I didn't respond to a single message. Instead, I sat at my kitchen table, sipping coffee while Monica reviewed the finalized contract from Whitmore Development. When she called, her voice carried a note of satisfaction I rarely heard. "Linda," she said, "this is one of the cleanest, strongest consulting agreements I've ever seen. 2-year term, guaranteed 6-figure income, performance bonuses, and complete autonomy. Evercall can't touch you now." I closed my eyes for a moment, letting that sink in. After 7 years of being treated as replaceable, I finally had leverage and freedom. That afternoon, the situation escalated. The phone rang again. This time, it wasn't Ethan. It was Harold Bennett from the city planning office. "I wanted to give you a heads up," he said. "Evercore is panicking." I smiled faintly. "I can imagine. They've been calling non-stop, trying to find a way around the expedited permit process," Harold continued. "At one point, Ethan actually suggested that our procedures were outdated and should be modernized." I laughed. "That must have gone over well." "About as well as you'd expect," Harold replied dryly. The planning director reminded him those outdated procedures are the reason projects don't collapse into lawsuits. Before hanging up, Harold added, "For what it's worth, everyone here knows this mess is their own doing." By late afternoon, news of my new consulting role had spread through Omaha's development circle. Former colleagues called to congratulate me. Developers I hadn't spoken to in years suddenly wanted meetings. Even a local business reporter left a voicemail requesting comment. Evercore, meanwhile, was unraveling. Ethan's final attempt came just before sunset. He showed up at my house. I watched through the front window as he stood on my porch, expensive suit wrinkled, confidence replaced by raw panic. When I opened the door, he forced a smile. "Linda, please," he said. "We can fix this." I crossed my arms. "You already made your decision on Friday." "That was a mistake," he insisted. "Kayla wasn't ready." "We underestimated, you didn't underestimate," I corrected calmly. "You dismissed me." He swallowed. "Daniel Whitmore is threatening to pull Evercore from Riverside entirely. If that happens, you lose millions," I finished for him. Silence. "I'm willing to reinstate you as head of regulatory compliance," he said quickly. "Immediate effect. Whatever salary you want." I shook my head. Too late. Ethan's face tightened. "So that's it. You're going to destroy us out of spite." I met his gaze, steady and unflinching. "I'm not destroying anything," I said. "I'm simply no longer saving you." That night, I signed the Whitmore development contract. By Thursday morning, the fallout was public. Daniel Whitmore formally terminated Evercore's involvement in the Riverside development, citing serious concerns regarding regulatory competence and professional judgment. The project's architectural work was reassigned to Evercore's largest competitor. Ethan Reed's reputation took a direct hit. And Kayla Monroe. She was quietly reassigned to social media strategy after failing to submit a basic zoning variance correctly. By the end of the week, I stood in the city permit office, finalizing approvals under my own company's name. Harold watched with a grin as I applied my digital signature, the same signature Evercore had assumed they no longer needed. Walking out into the sunlight, I felt lighter than I had in years. They had called me disposable. They had called me replaceable. They had called me granny. And now, they were learning exactly how wrong they'd been. Friday morning brought headlines. Not the dramatic kind splashed across national news, but the quiet, devastating kind that circulate through professional circles like wildfire. An industry newsletter published a short piece titled, "Evercore Loses Riverside Project Amid Compliance Concerns." It didn't name me directly, but anyone who mattered knew exactly whose absence had caused the collapse. My phone buzzed non-stop. Former Evercore employees reached out first. Some apologized for staying silent when Ethan mocked me during meetings. Others admitted they'd been uncomfortable with how Kayla Monroe had been promoted so quickly, with so little experience. One message stood out. It was from Nora Patel, a junior analyst who had once cried in the bathroom after Ethan dismissed her concerns during a review. "I just wanted you to know," she wrote, "watching you walk away showed me I don't have to accept disrespect just to survive. Thank you." I stared at the screen longer than I expected to. Later that morning, I attended my first official meeting as an independent compliance consultant for Whitmore Development. Daniel Whitmore greeted me with a firm handshake and genuine respect. "No interruptions," he said pointedly, glancing at his executive team. "No shortcuts. We do this properly, or not at all." The contrast was staggering. Questions were thoughtful. My recommendations were documented, not dismissed. When I flagged a potential environmental compliance issue, the room went silent, not with annoyance, but with focus. "Good catch," Daniel said. "Let's adjust before it becomes a problem." For the first time in years, my expertise wasn't treated as an inconvenience. Meanwhile, Evercore was imploding. By mid-afternoon, another message hit the industry chat boards. 2 senior architects had resigned. One had reportedly accepted a position with the very firm now handling Riverside. Then came the internal memo leak. Someone anonymously forwarded me a screenshot from Evercore's staff email. Ethan Reed had sent a company-wide message attempting to clarify recent misunderstandings and reassure clients that operations remain stable. The comments section beneath it, private, but brutal, told a different story. "Stable. We just lost our biggest client. Maybe stop promoting interns over qualified professionals." Funny how the permits failed right after Linda left. I closed the email and leaned back in my chair. By evening, Ethan tried again. This time, it wasn't a call or visit. It was an email, long, emotional, and desperate. He blamed pressure from investors. He blamed office politics. He even hinted that the granny comment had been taken out of context. The final line read, "You were the backbone of Evercore. Please reconsider." I didn't reply. Because here's the truth they never understood: when you devalue someone long enough, they stop feeling obligated to save you. That weekend, I attended a regional development conference, not as Evercore's silent workhorse, but under my own name. My badge read, Linda Morgan, Regulatory Compliance Consultant. People recognized me. Some asked how Evercore could have let me go. Others quietly admitted they'd had similar experiences, and asked for advice. On Sunday night, as I reviewed new consulting inquiries, Monica called with one final update. "Evercore's board has scheduled an emergency review," she said. "Ethan's leadership is under scrutiny. Investors are not happy. I smiled softly. I'm not surprised. Neither am I, she replied. And Linda, this isn't the end. It's the beginning. I looked around my home office, quiet, calm, and finally mine. They thought firing me would silence me. Instead, it amplified everything they'd ignored. And somewhere deep down, Ethan Reed was realizing the most expensive lesson of his career: you don't mock experience. You don't replace competence with arrogance. And you never underestimate the person who knows where every rule, permit, and loophole lives. Because once they stop protecting you, everything falls apart. Monday morning arrived quietly. No frantic emails. No angry calls. Just sunlight spilling across my desk as I sipped my coffee and reviewed a new proposal from a renewable housing developer in Oregon. Then my phone vibrated. Monica's name lit up the screen. It's official, she said. Ethan Reed has been placed on indefinite leave. The board voted unanimously. I closed my eyes, not in triumph, but in release. And Kayla? I asked. A brief pause. Her position was eliminated during restructuring. Apparently, she never completed the certifications Evercore claimed she had. I exhaled slowly. So it was true. The promotion. The arrogance. The confidence. All built on air. By noon, the industry grapevine was buzzing. Evercore issued a carefully worded public statement about leadership realignment and recommitment to professional standards. But behind the scenes, clients were leaving. Some came straight to me. Over the next few weeks, Harper Regulatory Consulting grew faster than I'd ever imagined. I hired 2 former Evercore analysts, people who had been overlooked, talked over, and quietly brilliant. Together, we rebuilt processes that prioritized accuracy over ego. One afternoon, as I was finalizing contracts, a familiar name appeared in my inbox. Ethan Reed. No subject line. Just a single paragraph. Linda, I owe you an apology. I let power blind me. I believed confidence mattered more than competence, and I was wrong. I hope one day you can forgive me. I stared at the message for a long moment. Then I archived it. Some apologies are acknowledged not with replies, but with consequences. A month later, I was invited to speak on a panel about ethical leadership in development. As I took the stage, I spotted faces from my past, former colleagues, rivals, and even a few executives who had once dismissed me. I told them the truth. I wasn't fired because I was outdated, I said calmly. I was fired because experience doesn't flatter fragile egos. The room went silent. After the applause, a young woman approached me. She introduced herself as an intern, new to the industry, nervous, but determined. I just wanted to say, she said, I hope I'm like you one day. I smiled. You'll be better. Just don't let anyone convince you that respect has an expiration date. That evening, I walked past Evercore's glass building on my way to dinner. The lights were dimmer than I remembered. The logo still shone, but something about it felt hollow now. They had mistaken loyalty for weakness. They had confused silence with obedience. And they had believed that firing me would erase my influence. They were wrong. Because the truth is, when you remove the person who holds everything together, the collapse doesn't happen immediately. It happens quietly. System by system. Permit by permit. Client by client. Until one day, everyone finally sees what you lost. I didn't get revenge. I got freedom. Respect. And a career built on my own terms. And that was worth everything.